Hey guys, Blake Connors here. Today, I want you to imagine yourself in a scenario. You are customizing your RPG character, and you have two options. You can receive half damage, or you can deal double damage. So today we're going to be talking about, are they the same? And if not, which is better? So do you think that dealing double damage is better, receiving half damage is better, or it doesn't matter, they're the same? If you'd like to think about your decision, now is the time to pause the video, otherwise I'm going to keep talking. Okay, here we go. The math can get a little sticky towards the end of the video, so we're going to keep it as simple as possible by measuring health and damage with tangerines. I'm improvising here, okay? Let's lay down your base stats. You normally deal 2 damage. And if you double that damage, 4 damage. So now let's look at the difference from when you were doing average damage to double damage. Well, it's going to be 2, because you're dealing 2 more than what you used to do. Okay? Now let's take a look at receiving half damage. Let's say you would normally receive 2 damage, but for whatever reason, you only receive half that, which is 1. And the difference between receiving 2 damage and receiving 1 damage is 1. So the top is the end result, including the base amount you started with. And the bottom represents the difference between doubling your damage and receiving half damage. By choosing to double your damage, you're doing plus 2 damage compared to receiving 1 less damage. But these are such small numbers. Let's expand these numbers. Let's just clear the... So now let's say each tangerine represents 10 damage. So you normally deal 20 damage, and we're going to double your damage to deal 40 damage. The difference between that is 20 damage from doubling your damage. Now, you normally receive 20 damage from an attack, and you only receive half that damage. So we're going to take away 1. And the difference between receiving 20 damage and 10 damage is 10 damage. So now you're dealing 20 additional damage compared to receiving 10 less damage. And there's a pattern here. By doubling your damage, you're doubling the difference between receiving half damage. I'll say that again. By doubling your damage, you receive double the difference compared to receiving half damage. What we can do is look at this question in a different light. We could ask ourselves, would you rather deal plus 20 damage or receive 10 less damage? Now, there are a lot of factors we haven't covered, such as, are there very few monsters that I would be dealing double damage to, versus are there many monsters that I would be receiving half damage to? For this example, we're going to assume there's just as many monsters that you would deal double damage to, versus there's just as many monsters you would receive half damage to. Not just that, but there's a lot of factors, such as, does your party have a tank? Maybe you do want that minus 10 damage, but this guy's starting to mow his lawn, so I'm going to wrap up the video here. Yeah, that's it. I lied. I forgot to... God, this is so scuffed. If you are not a game designer, this is pretty much unnecessary information, and you don't need to watch. This is like, just close the video. It doesn't matter. Now, there is another way to deal with resistances and dealing increased damage, and I didn't make this up. I've seen this in games. Unfortunately, less games than I like to see, and so I'd like to just shed some light on this so more people do this in their games, because it's just more fair. So, let's use our other diagram, where we had this over here, just like that. Okay. So let's focus on the bottom row, and what we want, our end goal, is so these numbers are equal. We want the difference between having increased damage to receiving less damage to be the same number. Okay? And in order to do that, all we have to do is change the left side here. Instead of saying, all right, you can deal double damage, what we want to say is you can deal 50% more damage. Now here's the difference. We're going to start off with 2 again. Okay? So we're going to deal an average of 2 damage, and if we do 50% more damage, whether it's the monster's weakness or whatever, we add 1, because 50% of 2 is 1. Now let's take the difference, which is 1. Okay? Now let's say we received 2 damage, but now we're receiving 50% less damage. 50% less of 2 is 1, and the difference is 1. That's it. You don't deal double damage, you deal 50% more damage. Hey D&D, take notes, your math is all messed up.